Soon. And we're recording. Welcome back to the 8th episode of the Trove Design Podcast, where today we're going to be talking all about storytelling and how it relates to design, marketing, and all things. And as you see, we're actually joined by our first guest here on the podcast, Brian, who is a storytelling coach for public speakers, as well as a fellow podcaster. So we will plug his Instagram as well. Go follow him on Instagram and see his podcast over there. I believe on Spotify as well. So welcome, Brian. Thank you for coming on to the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much, Charlie and Andres. Appreciate you having me.
Awesome. Well, I think let's just go ahead and hop right in. And I'm going to ask you the first question, which is,
Sure.
What is storytelling? Why is it important?
Ooh, so we're gonna start off. What is storytelling? And I think it comes down to what is a story. This I didn't know at first, and I had to really do some research to figure this out. But the answer to what is a story is it's something that has a character, it has action, it has conflict, it has a scene, and then it has some sort of resolution. There are things that specifically have to be present within a story in order for it to be considered a story. Misconception a lot of people have on storytelling or just stories is that anytime we're just talking about a situation, we're talking about a story, but in order for it to be considered a story, it's got a whole trail all the way up to a resolution. And then your other question was what, Charlie?
Yeah, the other question around just like what is a story, and then why is storytelling important? So you're talking about kind of the full conflict and then bringing it over to resolution.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it important, or how can we use that in our businesses or at our current place of employment?
Great. That's actually a really great question. Let me talk about my experience with storytelling, and it may lead into really how we can use storytelling in order to help all of us get to where we want to go. There was a time, it was about 6 months ago, I'm sitting there learning how to be a public speaker. And one of the things that I'm watching on TV, I'm watching somebody talk about storytelling and how important storytelling is to being able to communicate a message and to just get whatever point you have across so that it's completely understood. As I started learning more about storytelling, I started realizing that stories are something that we as humans have been doing since the dawn of time. Stories are the reason why we're able to survive, and our brains are wired to remember stories. And it's not only just wired to remember stories, but stories can cause people to feel some sort of way emotionally, and then depending on what message you're trying to give them, they're more apt to want to listen or move forward with what you're saying. When it comes to marketing, the thing really is in, let's say, design or a product or service. At the end of the day, what do we want to do is we want to get people to want to buy that product or service or buy into the design. So if we wrap storytelling around why that's important, we're able to tell a story that they listen to and they're immediately like, yes, okay, that makes sense to me. I'm going to go ahead and move forward with this product or service. Does that make sense?
Definitely. I love that description. I mean, I think being able to tie a story to whether it's a product or a service and really kind of get that full life cycle of the product, right? Through maybe a user story or even just within marketing. That's a brilliant tactic to kind of show how you do help individuals with your product, or
right.
Even just having a funny anecdote maybe.
Yeah, there's something that I read about called the value story, and I read it in a book called Stories That Stick. And a value story is you taking your ideal client and you take them on a journey of a struggle that they're having in their life. Let's say you've got a company who has, a website that doesn't look the greatest or a logo that doesn't look the greatest, and they know that improving that is going to help their business. Well, you tell them a story about somebody that is struggling with things that are happening because of those, and then what their interaction was like after working with you, and then what ultimately happens after the fact. What life are they living? Who do they become? And if you tell them in a story, if somebody sees themselves in it, then it's a clear Like, yeah, I need to go with you because you're solving a problem that I have. And I completely can see myself with that problem. So the value story, something everybody should be thinking about if you have a company or a design company or what have you, is to think about getting a value story with your ideal client as the hero.
I love that, and that kind of actually goes into the next question. So it's a great segue on your part of like how storytelling is useful in marketing. I mean, you talked about the value story. Is there a other types of stories that are typically used within marketing, or I didn't know if that was typically there's just one, or if there's multiple that
Oh,
can be
sure.
utilized.
Yeah, I mean the value story, that's putting your ideal client at the helm of it. But I do know of a company that used storytelling in order to completely turn their company around. And it had to do, and it was a story I read in Stories That Stick, but it had to do with Extra, the chewing gum. The story goes like this: it's the early 90s, and Extra's dominating the chewing gum market. There is not even anybody close to second when it comes to sales. And their biggest campaign, whenever you would watch TV, is you would see them talk about how their gum has the longest lasting flavor. And throughout the 90s into the 2000s, they dominated. And then they saw themselves starting to fall back. All of a sudden, they were in second, and then they were in third. And then what happens? They decide that they're going to invest a bunch of money back into their ad campaign in order to talk about how they have the longest lasting flavor. I mean, gosh, it worked in the 90s. It should still be able to work now. People haven't changed. The problem was that they weren't improving their numbers. Sales were still going down, and they were dumping as much money as they could. And that's when a researcher came to them and said, here's your problem: is people make the decision to choose their chewing gum before they even get up to the counter whenever you're at a convenience store. So what this researcher had told them was that they need to get into the heart and minds of people before they even approach that bubblegum counter. So Extra looked to story because they know storytelling just communicates with people at a very human level. So they came out with a commercial, and the commercial was a story. It was a story about a high school couple, both of which you could tell were falling in love in the beginning, both of which were kind of growing in their relationship towards the end. And then the story ends with one proposing to the other. Extra, the chewing gum, was only mentioned once in that entire commercial. And what happened after that commercial launched is they immediately went back up to number one. They got into the hearts and minds of an audience, and Extra just became the dominant player. And that to me really illustrates the power storytelling can really have for any one of our companies, as long as we're using it effectively.
Wow, that I mean, that's crazy that they only mentioned it once, and yet it still had this effect that kind of brought them back up to the top of the market. Andres,
Mm-hmm.
did you have any thoughts on that as well?
I don't. I just gotta give you a little applause here.
Oh, I got an
That was,
applause. I
yeah,
like
that was
that.
Yeah.
awesome. I love that.
Okay, excellent.
The book that you're talking about, Stories That Stick by Kendra Hall, I highly recommend anyone out there to pick up that copy of that book. It's really impactful. I like the breakdown of a lot of the stories there, and what Brian says. There's the value story, and then there's more stories to tell. And the book also talks about when to choose the proper story for the proper situation, or for the situation, and I should have said. But yeah, great. That was super good. I have nothing to add though, and that's the thing.
I,
Excellent. Well, that
I,
would go
I would
ahead.
have another question for you there, Brian, but I didn't want to
Sure.
cut you off.
Go ahead. No, I'd love a question.
So as designers, people who are watching, viewers, as designers, how can we, I guess, identify some of those stories or help tell those stories? I'm assuming alongside of a marketing department, or really as we design these products and as we're looking for unique touch points with our users. That's something that designers often look for is key touch points or differentiators of the product.
Sure.
Is there a way that we can kind of help tell these stories or work alongside of our teams, whether we're at a company or working for ourselves, uh, to do
Great
that better?
question. That's a great question. So it starts with the most important thing before you tell any story. in regard to the value story or using it for marketing, but it's a problem, and it's you knowing what problem you're solving, right? And the problem you're solving is the person that's the main character in your story of their problem getting solved, and then seeing themselves on the other side of it. In the situation with Extra the chewing gum, their approach wasn't necessarily there was a problem, but they emotionally connected with people, because most of us can experience that high school, love that potentially we had for somebody else, or infatuation, and it just brought us back to a different time in our lives. So they went much deeper. But really, for anybody that's just looking to do storytelling, it's figuring out or sitting down, okay, what problem am I really solving? And then who am I solving it for? Because you have to know who you're solving it for, because that's the main character. And the only way your audience will know that they're the main characters, because they can see themselves as you're telling the story. It's all in the detail that you choose to talk about. They see themselves, they recognize the problem, they agree they have it, it's solved by working with you or your company. And then this is their quality of life after the fact.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear from the viewers if you have any ads or marketing campaigns that you distinctly remember because of the story, whether that was yesterday you saw it, or 5 years ago, or 10 years ago. We'd love to hear it in the comments below. So please put a comment down on maybe a time that you saw storytelling within marketing. I'm sure it's all over the place if we just kind of think about it for a second and look at it. So it looks like the next kind of question that we wanted to go at was looking at the notes here. What makes a good story? It looks like they got switched up a little, Andres.
Oh yeah, so I have a question for Brian, but we can answer that question first, and then I'll ask you another question after that.
And the question was, what makes for a good story? Okay. I'm going to try to explain something I realized very recently in storytelling that was not a part of my journey whatsoever. In the beginning, I thought storytelling was all about how effectively can I open my mouth and talk through a situation? How effectively can I bring someone, into a situation that's happening in my life, have them mentally picture it, and then take them on this journey and be able to choose the right words where they're staying in this story and they're just enjoying the experience. I worked really hard to get to that point where I could technically tell a good story, but that's not what a good story needs. I mean, yes, that's part of it. A good story needs to get somebody to care right from the beginning. You have to ask yourself, if you were listening to somebody about to tell a story, whether it's a story you're telling for your design company or whether it's a story you just want to open your mouth and say, if you don't say anything that gets people to really care about what's happening in the story or care to even listen to it, then everything you're saying are just words, and it just becomes this long dragging, like, okay, when are they going to either get to their point or, stop telling the story? So I then took a step back and said, okay, how do you get people to care? And I know I'm kind of going on a tangent, but I'd be happy to somewhat share my thoughts on how you get people to care as you start the story.
Yeah, I would love that. As somebody who wants to tell good stories, I actually said on a previous episode of the podcast that public speaking is one of the things I want to get better at. And so I think a big part of that is storytelling. And so I would love to hear, how can I connect more with, whether that's at my company or just an individual, a good friend we're trying to tell a story.
So I'm going to do the best I can to illustrate this by giving you an example of a story. Okay. When I was 7 years old, I had this little blue chair. And this little blue chair, every day when I would get home from school, I would go and I would sit on it. And it just made me feel incredibly comfortable, after, my day at school. And on the weekends, I would pull this chair around with me like, a little kid pulls their blanket around. It went around with me everywhere. And one day I got home from school and the chair was gone. And I went to my mom and I said, Mom, where's my blue chair? Okay, I'm going to stop the story right there. Let me ask you a question. Do you care about my blue chair?
Not a whole lot.
Not a whole lot. Okay, so
not gonna lie.
So Okay, so you like blue, but the whole point is, like, if I tell you a story about my blue chair, it is crucial that you care about my blue chair, because as I tell you this story about the fact that my blue chair is gone, just like I care, you've got to care. My job is to, before I go into that story, is know what can I say so that Charlie cares about my blue chair. And that those are really bringing people in. If you're talking about, like, let's take this to like a personal story. If you're talking about a situation where, a family member, let's say, went to the hospital, right? Before you start talking about that family member going to the hospital, you can talk about what their relationship is, what sort of relationship you have with this person. What are the things that you do together on the weekend? How can you demonstrate how you really feel about this person, so that when you start talking about the fact that they went to the hospital, the listener's just as hurt as you are. And that's pulling people in. When I talk about starting with the problem, is you get an audience to care, or people to care, if they can recognize the problem. It's demonstrated in a way where they're like, yes, I have that problem. I care to hear more of this story. What's going to happen next? And that really is the key to good storytelling.
I love that. I mean, I find it so beautiful that it sounds like just about everyone can kind of relate to a key problem, or, you can bring in some of those core emotions. And no matter your background or where you're from, to a certain extent, we all kind of have very similar core memories. Like you mentioned, seeing a family member in the hospital. I believe that everyone's probably had an experience that is similar to that. And so being able to kind of bring them in on why was that family member so important, what was that love like, and then moving forward. Am I correct in saying that, Brian?
Yeah, no, you're correct in that. One of the things I've realized is that as we think about memories of our own lives, this goes back to the power of storytelling. There's a reason why that memory's there. There is an emotion that is present there. We don't, as people, remember anything anybody ever says unless there's some sort of emotion that's present with it. And storytelling can provoke emotion, so that the experience for the listener becomes memorable and it becomes enjoyable. And I think that's kind of where really the power of storytelling really comes in, and what I've come to understand of learning this art at a very deep level.
I love that. Andres, I wanted to make sure that you got time to ask the questions that you had.
Thanks for prompting me there, Charles. I know we're about to end the episode pretty soon, but my question for you, Brian, is how are you collecting those life stories that are personal to you, and do you document them in a way that you can like reach out and grab it, or before you go on stage or somewhere like that, and reference it really quick?
I love this question. I love this question because this is something I've been given thought to. When I talk about the stories I'm going to tell, where do I pull them from? And I read something in a book. It was called Storyworthy, and it's by this guy who just dominates the moth storytelling stage. And he says that stories live in the 5-second moments that change our life forever. It's like a 5-second moment that there is no going back from. Let me give you an example. Have you guys both seen the movie Encanto? I know
Yep.
Andres has seen it.
Let's
Oh,
see. Let's add Charlie back to the conversation.
Yes, yeah, I loved Encanto. There are a couple snippets there, small snippets
yeah.
that meant quite a bit.
So there is a 5-second moment that really made that movie. Before I go into it, do either of you two want to just kind of take a stab at it? What do you believe was the most important 5-second moment in that entire movie?
I have an idea. Mine was the scene at the end. Oh, first we should say spoilers. I'm going to say spoilers.
Oh
to
yeah, my
anyone
bad. Yeah,
listening.
anybody listening
Yeah,
is a
if you
spoiler.
have not seen Encanto, pause, go watch it, come back, maybe a couple tissues later. And I would say for me, the key moment was in the river, kind of at the end, when the grandma and the main protagonist, whose name I forget right now, they were
Mirabel. Yeah.
they kind of had this reckoning moment of actually accepting each other into the family. For me, that was very impactful. I don't know if that's the moment you're talking about, but
It follows the moment I'm talking about.
Follows. Okay.
Yeah. So I'll go ahead and go into it since I know we're running up to the 20 minutes. Unless Andres, did you want to give it a shot?
I just love the part where Pedro sacrificed himself. So that would be my quick answer.
Or Pedro sacrificed
Or
himself.
I believe.
Abuelo.
Yeah, that's
I'm pretty
at the
sure his
beginning.
name is
Oh,
Pedro.
yeah, right at the beginning of the movie. So the 5-second moment, I believe, lived in that moment where Abuela's eyes widened right before the house fell apart. And let me elaborate on what I mean by that. In that moment where Mirabel is telling her that she is the problem, that she is the reason why this family is coming apart, and everything comes down on her, the minute Abuela's eyes widen, there is no going back to her old life. She is now in a new life now, a new life where she sees herself differently, a new life where she sees everybody else differently. That is a split-second moment that was just a complete division in Abuela's life. And we all have those moments in our own lives where something happens, whether it's situationally, externally in our worlds, or internally in our mind. Something happens where there is no going back from that. You are now a new person. Our stories and what we crave to hear from other people are their moments, those 5-second moments that that completely change their lives.
Andres, you need
Sitting
to
in
do
that-
the clapping sound again.
I was just sitting in that moment, and you're so right. Yeah, definitely. That was applause worthy. Yeah, great job. Again, if you haven't connected with Brian here, I'm just going to put his handle up once again. This is on Instagram. Go look him up, Brian Drake, on Instagram, and connect with him. And what was I going to say? I forget my last question. Oh, I do remember now. You said at the beginning, or in our green room session, so right before we did this, and for anyone out there that's listening and watching this right now, we're doing everything kind of live, but not live. So all the editing, we're doing it on the spot. So if we see some fumbling around, that is why. Anyways, and also if you're enjoying this conversation, consider subscribing to our channel. Small plug there. All right. Anyways, what I want to say is, or ask you, you had a question for us at the beginning.
I do have a question. Yes, I would love to ask you. This has been something that's been on my mind essentially all morning. Okay, so here's my question. Well, let me ask you guys if you agree with this. Do you agree that what most people in life are chasing or they desire is a life that they're living where they have the freedom to do whatever they want? Would you guys agree that we're all sort of chasing this complete, so this life where we are completely in control, right? We can do what we want. So I started thinking about storytelling. If that's the end result, and think about this with any one of you guys in your problem, in your audience, and really what you're looking to do. I started thinking today that if I'm going to succeed in communicating the effectiveness of storytelling, I need to be able to say that storytelling will eventually get you to a life that you have the freedom to do what you want. And then it's figuring out how do I plug in, the degrees of separation. I believe the first degree of separation to the life that we want is money. And let me know if you guys agree with this, but there's the belief that if we get more money, we can live a life of freedom because money no longer controls us. Would you guys agree with that?
I think so. Right, Charles?
Okay,
I think money, like being able to take away the money component, definitely frees a lot of people up, right?
Sure, exactly. Like it's there you go. And I feel like most of us are in a position where we are after that that goal of getting more money so that we can eventually get to the life that we want, or the life of freedom. So I started thinking, okay, how can I tie storytelling to that? So, and this can just be an exercise for all of you when it comes to what you're doing with your lives and the problems that you're solving. Is how are you helping people with what you're doing get from where they are right now with your product or service? How can that eventually lead them to a life of freedom or to feeling free? And I feel like if people aren't giving you their money for that long-term goal, people are giving you money so that they feel more comfortable in the short term. Now, my thought on storytelling is that storytelling leads to more impactful marketing. More impactful marketing leads to more money. more money leads to a life where you live with, much more freedom. Those are the degrees of separation, but I wanted to collaborate with you guys and just get your thoughts as you're listening to me say this. Does it make sense? And do you guys agree?
I think it does. Yeah.
Yeah, I really liked how, I mean, you started that statement with kind of like a core value of, you know, financial freedom allows for more just freedom. And I think really want to take it back to when you were talking about storytelling and connecting with like a core emotion. Because I would say that maybe for some people, it isn't the financial freedom, but they're still, I mean, they're seeking some form of freedom, and that comes in a different way for maybe them. And so, being able to tie it with that core emotion, like you mentioned, in terms of storytelling,
Right.
go there.
When you think about like your target audience, I started thinking about if I wanted to approach storytelling, and again, you can do this with your own company too. Think about if I were to approach storytelling and try to make it, if I try to market it to people that don't have that, where they need more money to have more freedom in their lives, where they've already solved that problem. So it's like, okay, so what problem do they have, or what do they want? And to me, it's those are people that want to make more of an impression, when they're speaking up on a stage, or when they're, conversating with people, and be able to be more impactful, and stories can get there. Kind of going on a rant at this point, but I feel like it's a very important exercise for anybody to sit down and do. It's figuring out what is it that you're doing that is going to get the person you're doing it for. How is it going to get them to the life that they want? And I think that's where success in business and success in products and services, and those that really separate themselves from everybody else, is it's clear what they're doing. It's clear who they're doing it for. And they know that that there's results, and people are, getting where they want to go. Any thoughts on that, or any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, I love that. I think I mean that ties into maybe the greater scope of looking at branding and brand strategy as well. I know Andres and I have talked about bringing on some more individuals to talk about that. And if that's something that interests you as a viewer, please let us know in the comments, and we can definitely make sure that we get somebody on. Or if there's any other sorts of interests that you have, please put them down in the description below, and we'll or in the comments below, and we will find some people to bring on. Brian, I think that having you on and really being able to talk through storytelling and the impact that it makes in design, in business, in our personal lives, I feel like I've learned so much this one as well. So thank you so much for coming on and hopping on. And Andres, I'll let you answer the question he posed.
I think we share the same answer, Brian. So I'm Charles. Getting your names mixed up, but I think I follow in the same path too. What you said.
Okay.
So mixing up people's names. So Brian,
Yeah.
one final question for you, because as we're
Sure.
wrapping up the episode, was there any other questions that we missed that you would have just loved to have answered for us, or answered today?
In regard to storytelling, no, not that I can, not that I can think of. I feel like it's storytelling is one of those things, and this is just what I want to leave everybody with, because it was a problem I had in the very beginning. Is you have to be careful when you look into learning more about storytelling. And my example is, imagine you want to learn math, right? You go to Google, you type in math, and then you get a bunch of information that teaches you math. It's the same thing with storytelling. Storytelling is a very general thing. If you try to just learn how to do better in storytelling, it's not going to really help, or everything that is helping is just little pieces of a bunch of different things. So my advice to you is figure out what you want to use storytelling for, and then dive into, okay, how can I learn more about using storytelling in that way? That would be my final piece of advice for all of you guys.
Gotcha. So I'm gonna guess that a lot of our viewers are designers, physical product designers, and anyone else in between and beyond that. So if you were talking to that specific audience, what kind of resources would you recommend for them to look at and to help them develop their stories? And it doesn't necessarily have to be specific to, like, let's say, like UI and UX design, user interface, user experience design, but maybe it has to do with when they're going to like an interview or something like that, how are they able to tell a good story so that way it stays in their mind of the interviewers, so that they potentially get a better job or get a job?
Uh, love that question. First off, and I've actually thought about this. Love that you asked this, Andres. When you go into an interview, if we're just in a position where we just want to interview and get a better job, typically the applications are going to say we're looking for somebody who is a team player, right? Let's just use team player as an example. So it's like you could walk into the interview and you can say, yeah, my name's Brian. And let me tell you what, I play well with others. I love talking with people. I love talking with my coworkers. I talk to people on the street. And if I can help anybody, I will. I'm a team player. Now that's going to fall flat on somebody interviewing you. It's like, okay, well, thanks for using this buzzword over and over. What you want to do is you want to tell a story about a situation in which you were a team player, a story that tells them that you're a team player without telling them that you're a team player. And that's, the most important part of telling that story is not just saying out loud, I did this because I'm a team player. I helped that person because I'm a team player. It's like you should just demonstrate, this is what I did. And then I did this. And then I did this. And then by the end, the interviewer is like, wow, great story. And it really sounds like you're a team player. That's the type of person I'm looking for. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's something that, the reason why I brought it up, because it's like, again, pulling from my own life when going through the interview process is like, how do you answer that one question they always ask, like, tell us a little bit about yourself or something like that, and it's like,
yeah,
right, it's so hard because you want to answer it in so many different ways, and then in your head it's like, okay, which way do I want to answer that? Anyways, you were gonna say something.
If you look at what they're looking for, and that's kind of just doing the research. Like if you are reading that they're looking for somebody who is a team player, looking for somebody that is can handle confrontation, and you see the list of like ingredients that they're looking for. And it's like, okay, if they ask me, tell me about yourself, how can I tell one story that demonstrates as many of these ingredients as possible? So they immediately walk away thinking, okay, that's our guy or gal. We need to hire them. And you got to be honest. If you're just trying to make a situation seem like you were a team player or that you handled confrontation because you just want to try to convince them, a good story is not convincing. It just tells them the message by just demonstrating what it is that you did.
Dang, yeah, I think it's a good note to end on. I'm just gonna start playing our outro music here.
Okay. I like that.
And Charles, any other questions that we could rapid fire to Brian before we let him go?
I don't know about questions. I guess the last one would be, what can we do to help you? I know you came on this podcast, and it's been such a big help to us and our listeners and our viewers. And if you haven't, please go and follow, or at least look at Brian's Instagram as well as his podcast that he hosts over on Spotify. And anything else, Brian, that we can do or send people your way?
No, I mean, not necessarily. My mission is to try to educate as many people about storytelling as I can, because I truly believe that storytelling can lead to a life of freedom. And so the more people that I can educate and help on that path, eventually I will be on that path myself. So I appreciate you having me on your podcast today.
Yeah, thank you for coming, and we'll definitely have to have you back, as I think this is one of the longer episodes, just because it's been so good to dig in the weeds around storytelling with you. So
Sure.
We'll definitely have to have you back.
Okay, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, let us know in the comments as well. As like, what else would you like to hear from Brian? Brian gave us a little bit of teaser of a bunch of different things. I'm just gonna pause the music now. Oh, I did it already. About like value story and other types of stories that maybe he didn't have enough time to dive into, and other components of story. It's like, how do you pick a story for the right situation or this situation that you're walking into, stuff like that. So anyways, that's my final thought there, Charles and Brian, and everyone that's watching. Thanks for stopping by. All right, take care.
You guys take care.